listening to the Marketing Personalities Podcast, a podcast for growth-minded entrepreneurs that serves up valuable insight and interviews about aligning your marketing strategy with your personality type. Because here's the deal. You shouldn't have to feel fake and salesy in order to grow your business. And you no longer have to. Your marketing strategy can feel good to implement and it can work. You can attract the right clients and customers to your business and grow your profits, all while staying true to who you naturally are. So in the name of honest business growth, bring your unique talents, perspectives, and personality to the table. And join us on this week's podcast episode to discover marketing that feels good for you. Welcome back to another episode of the Marketing Personalities Podcast. I'm Brit Kolo, and I'm here today with Sarah Groskreutz, who is an organizational consultant and coach. Sarah, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Brit.
So Sarah and I are here today to discuss her marketing personality type. She is an ISFP, and we're going to talk about how she's applying it to her marketing strategy and what has shifted in that strategy since doing a strategy check session with me. So we're going to get into all of that, what's going on. We're going to go deep as always. But first, you've got to get to know Sarah. So Sarah, first, tell us about your entrepreneurial life right now. What do you have your hands in?
Yeah. So right now, I'm still in the early stages, my first year of my entrepreneurial journey. I transitioned after about 20 years in an organization and moved on to decide I wanted to go out on my own and take more control over the work that I was doing. And so that has been just a very incredibly rewarding experience. And it's really exciting because now I'm building something that is uniquely my own, kind of made a career out of building functions and teams and all of those things and been really successful building something from the ground up. But I realized that if I was going to do that again, I really wanted to do that for myself and build my own business. So my background is largely, like I said, I had a 20-year career in higher education, starting at student services and being in student advising. And then I moved on into human resource and organizational development. And that's really where I kind of found my passion, was working with leaders to provide support and guidance to them, really being a trusted advisor, and helping them identify the issues in their organizations that were sort of holding them back from doing their greatest work. And so I'm taking that forward now and providing coaching to leaders or to potential and developing leaders. That's another piece that I really enjoy, is working with new leaders who are branching out and starting to come into their leadership personality. And then again, that, like I said, that organizational consulting, where I can go into an organization and really assess kind of what's going on and helping them to become more efficient and more effective in the work that they do.
That's good. So 20 years in your career, and then you made the leap or the jump or the careening off the cliff, as they say.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how has that been for you so far? I mean, I'm sure it's been a lot, because I know for me, I had only been in my corporate career for 4 years and it was quite the transition. So for you, what has that been like?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I'm not going to lie, it's scary and it's a little hard and it can be lonely. And so, I've been thinking about it for quite a while. I had this, this kind of entrepreneurial sense in the sense that I could always find opportunities to build something. So even within that 20 years being with the same organization, I never really held on to any one job more than 2 or 3 years because I was always looking and identifying a new opportunity where I felt like I could make a difference. And so it was really nice to be able to have the structure and the security of a large organization, providing that paycheck and those benefits and everything like that. But then, like I said, I got to a point where I decided, it was time for something new, something different. And I really had this inkling in the back of my head that I might want to go out on my own and build something.
Mm.
And so I just really kind of took the leap, and I took a little while. Fortunately, I sort of made a plan and set aside some funds to be able to support me for a little bit of time while I made the transition and really explored exactly what I wanted to do in a business. So I have to say that while the sort of pressure and anxiety around building a financially sustainable business and making sure that I have enough income coming in and everything like that, there's a lot of pressure with that. But on the flip side of that, I am so incredibly happy with where I am right now in life and the work that I'm doing, that it really it's all been worth it. And I'm trying to just sort of, keep that vision and that courage to say, even as you're riding the ups and downs of a business, to just say that right now, this is what feels right. And so I'm actually very excited about what I'm doing. And that feels good to me.
That's good to hear. I'm just really curious about this. What would you say to someone who has a long-standing career, maybe not in one position, but one place of employment or one industry, and they have all of that reputation and experience built up, and now they're kind of getting that inkling of, I think I could probably do this on my own. What would you say to them? Like, I think that's a very interesting place that not everybody, I mean, I guess it's all happening at once, but a lot of the times, and maybe this is because this is my story. So I see a lot of it of, only being in a career for a few years and then realizing like, okay, doesn't really work for me. I'm going to move out and do my own thing. It feels like a different type of situation when you've been in a career for you, 2 decades, right? So what would you say to that
Yeah.
person maybe in that same situation right now?
Yeah. I mean, I think what I would say to do, which is maybe a little bit different than what I've done, although I maybe dabbled a little bit, I should say, is really start to formulate an idea and even start to build a business on the side. So,
Mm,
the infamous side hustle. I would really suggest for people to do some work, maybe even working with a coach. I mean, I worked with a career transition coach before making the decision. I
oh,
knew that something was coming up, but I really decided that I wanted to have someone to sort of guide me through that.
mhm,
So I think, like I said, a couple of things. Maybe working with a coach to get an idea and explore what you might do and testing out whether or not there's a market for it.
mhm,
So, it's much different. I'm doing much of the same work that I did previously in the organization I have, but that was a huge organization that offered endless opportunities for me to coach and consult.
mhm,
And I was getting a steady paycheck while doing it. So, thinking about while you have that steady job, while you have that security, start to explore what you might do if you were to go off on your own and
mhm,
try to figure out if there is a market for those services. Like I said, I had somewhat intentionally started putting money aside to be able to support me while I made that transition. So I would highly suggest, like, if you can, start to live how you think you might live if you didn't have a job and were really struggling. I joke around with some of my former colleagues and friends saying, like, I feel like I'm living a 25-year-old life now as a 45-year-old woman, because I'm going back to those ideas of like, okay, how do we budget this? Maybe I need
mhm,
to go to the library to check out books instead of, buying books and everything. And so it's been an interesting kind of perspective in terms of what you can live without and how adapted you become to
mm,
having that stable salary.
mhm,
So while you have that security, try to just make a little space for yourself to explore something on the side.
mhm,
Set aside, if you're able to, any money. I know that that can be difficult to do, and sometimes you have to change your standard of living a little bit. And then, get some help. See if there's a mentor or a coach that you could hire, or an organization, find an industry organization where you might be able to go and start networking. For me, that was a part that I wanted to build a network around other coaches and consultants so that I could get a real sense of what it's actually like to be in business for yourself. So building those connections can be really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it comes down to, again, the personality. As an ISFP, I do not like structure. I don't like hierarchy. I like to be really flexible and sort of have control over what I can do. And I worked for a very large, hierarchical, very traditional organization where you had so many levels of power that it was hard to really get in and get things done. It took a lot of time. So thinking about your personality in terms of, do you like that sort of structure of an organization? Because if you do, I think going into business can be a little bit difficult sometimes because you have to create all of that for yourself. So.
But now you just said you're an ISFP and you don't really love structure. Your personality type, the name of your personality type is the adventurer, and you're part of the explorer tribe. And so that hierarchy, the structure, the org chart, and all the systems and processes, I'm sure, 20 years in an organization, you assimilated, you got in there, you dealt with it. And at the same time, it's not necessarily your preferred way to go about things. And so you're now in a place where you're able to, I wonder how this has been, recognizing that structure can be helpful and knowing that you prefer less structure than probably a lot of other people. So what has that been like? Basically being a completely free bird out there, totally flexible, totally open. You don't have to have the structure if you don't want it because no one's putting it on you anymore. What has that transition been like?
Yeah. So I would say probably the two biggest things for me is to put light structure. So, you look at different, business coaching and philosophy and putting people like how to become an entrepreneur and everything like that. And you see tons of people out there really organizing things and have super complicated spreadsheet and all of that stuff. And really for me, I just like to make things simple and lightly structured. So I find the tools that help me. And I did this as well, in my career in organizations is to just say, okay, how can I find the tools that are helpful for me, but still allow for flexibility, allow for adaptability. So I really, for me, I really track my energy a lot because, as an introvert, that's something that your energy is everything. And so being able to have the flexibility to say when I'm energized, when I'm engaged and have a lot of inspiration, I follow that and I just go and I work and I work and I work. And then maybe I just feel like it's 2:00. I feel exhausted. I'm going to lay down and take a little bit of a nap. And then I get back up at 4, o'clock or so, and I'm ready to do another couple hours of work. So like I said, that light structure, keeping things simple. I just really like to simplify my life and my business structures as much as possible so I don't have to make a million decisions about things.
Yeah.
So that has really helped me. And then I think what has been the biggest help for me has been connecting with other people who are also entrepreneurs. So I'm very fortunate in that I have a good friend who is in the same boat as me, leaving a career after about 20 some years to go out into her own and do consulting. And so we're supporting one another in terms of getting things done and saying, where are you at today? How are things going? And we're actually very similar personality wise. And so we both need that. We're both heavy P's. And so being able to provide that for one another has been really helpful because when one of us might be down or floundering a little bit, you can pick up the phone and say, okay, this is what's happening right now. And the other one understands totally what we're going through because we're both building new businesses.
Yes.
So that has been what has been most helpful for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I go too long without engaging with someone within my network, then I start to get a little bit more internal towards my, introversion, and maybe get a little overwhelmed by all the things that could and should be done.
Yeah.
So by keeping that check in with people, it helps me to stay action focused.
Yeah. Man, there is so much that you just shared that I feel like is so permission giving to, yes, ISFPs, but also I think I see this in a lot of P types, which P stands for perceiving. So if you're listening to this right now and your fourth letter, your fourth preference is a P, perceiving, all of what you just outlined is so encouraging. Even to me, who I definitely am a J, a judging type, and not a perceiving type, it's still really helpful to hear that even someone who's been in that really highly structured environment, I mean, I'm sure that you always had that schedule of 8 to 4, 9 to 5, 8 to 6, like whatever, you went in, you worked, and then you left. And that 2 o'clock nap, although your body needed it, it wasn't allowed, right? And I think it's
Right.
so encouraging to hear someone who lived that life for so long now building their own thing and giving themselves permission to tap into and really take advantage of and leverage your own personal lean and your own personal preference. It doesn't have to look like the structured 8 hour day or 9 hour day or whatever. It doesn't have to look like that, period. And so, this light structure, keeping it simple, tracking the energy, following the flow, like that's an option, everybody, especially if you're a P, man. Like that is an option. And then I also definitely support and resonate with the ability to connect with another, even just one other human that feels like they really get it. We are very different. You and I are very different in personality type, and I can still so much resonate with that need. And I think it's cool that you're recognizing that even as an introvert, that doesn't necessarily mean that you want to be completely isolated from everybody. You might not want to be a part of a
No.
huge group. That might not be a super helpful place for you, but being connected to one, maybe two people that can get it and that you can kind of run with, that can be immensely helpful. So I like all of the encouragement that you're giving within that. I want to, now that we've kind of touched on little pieces of the ISFP personality type, I want to kind of break it down for the listener in case they're not familiar. So let me break it down letter by letter, because I think this is a really interesting type. And we don't really hear from a lot of ISFPs. We do have a trend where there are a lot of INFJs and there are a lot of ENFPs, but not a lot of ISFPs. So let me break it down. I stands for introvert. S stands for observing or sensing. So you prefer to pay attention to external cues rather than internal cues and that data. The F stands for feeling, meaning that you prefer to make decisions from your feelings as opposed to thought, those thinking thoughts. And then, like we said, P stands for perceiving, which means that you tend to prefer being open to the possibilities, not necessarily seeing a lot of black and white between options, but seeing more gray area out there and preferring to stay more flexible. So as we pull all that together, your personality type is named the adventurer, like I said before, and it's part of the explorer tribe. And if you are a part of the explorer tribe or are not, and you're fascinated by this tribe, we had a great episode number 93 with Christy Runzer, who happens to also be an ISFP. And in that episode 93, Christy and I sat down to speak about the entire Explorer tribe and what it's like to be this experience-driven, this action-taking type. And so definitely recommend listening to that if you're curious. And as it relates to being an ISFP, I see the ISFP marketing personality type being very much in the flow when you're able to kind of just like throw something out there, act on an idea, act on an opportunity. Maybe the whole plan isn't totally fleshed out, but for you, it doesn't really need to be. Me again, like the very light structure throw some stuff out there, see what works, get your hands dirty, get some things into action, and you'll learn as you go. So as I go through all of that, Sarah, what's resonating and what else does the audience need to know about you as an ISFP? Is there anything else kind of popping up for you?
Yeah, I think, tacking onto that S piece, that very like action oriented, taking stock of what is happening in the environment, what is
Mm-hmm.
happening externally. It is a very action driven perspective. And it's interesting because for a very long time, I had taken the Myers-Briggs a couple of times, and I had finally talked to somebody who had said, maybe you're answering in a wrong way. And I thought I was more of an INFP because I do have the idea, like to come from the ideas and tap into my intuition. And then I started working with someone who was a very strong N. And I realized, oh, I really am an S because I can talk about these things, but then I am about how are we going to take practical action?
Yeah.
And so I find it interesting. I kind of like this combination of the S and the F because it's sort of the F sort of suits me in terms of I like to build relationships with people. I like to explore what makes people tick, understanding them, their motivations, all of that, and really connecting from the heart and with humanity. But then having that S allows me to move that into action. And so I feel pretty comfortable establishing those relationships, getting to know people. One thing that I have found really successful for me, and just talking to potential clients and doing that is to just be really curious about what's going on for the person. What are they experiencing? What's happening at work? What's happening outside of work? And then from there, instead of just continually pontificating and discussing what that might all mean, I say, I can move us into, well, how do we take some action here? How do we explore? How do we play with this? And it doesn't have to be the one right thing. It just has to be something we're going to try out. And for me, I think that's where my P flexibility can come in handy, is because I don't get too particularly tied to any specific outcome and I'm really adaptable. So let's explore, let's try something based on what we know and how we feel right now. And if it doesn't quite work, that's okay. It's a lesson learned and we move on and we do something different.
Yeah.
Now that can be different, when I'm working with clients and especially around organizations, like the stakes can be really high. So you have to be mindful of just exactly where and when you're playing and sort of adventuring because the stakes could be really high. And so sometimes you do have to be really practical and thoughtful about things, and it's not really a time to play. But I like to encourage people as much as possible to be a little playful and just experiment. Just try this one little thing and see if that works for you. If it felt good, great. Keep exploring, digging deeper with that. If it didn't feel good, try something else.
Yeah. Well, and I can see how that kind of energy can be so important for those more steadfast, kind of stereotypical, kind of set in their ways types of organizations, because as we know, the world moves fast around here anymore, and so maybe your entire organization doesn't, turn on a dime, but maybe there's a certain department or a place within the arms of your entity that can play and experiment, and having that kind of energy come in and consult on that piece could completely revolutionize an entire organization if they're willing to have that kind of energy come in. That's interesting to me. I like it.
And I think success breeds more success. So, this was my experience in my previous career, was that, I could, do some work at an institutional level, but often I was working with small teams of, 2-3 people. And so if you're able to affect that small bit, and that's where my intimacy of my introvert self comes in, I like to work small and start there. And if you and others see success with that, they start thinking, well, what are they doing that they're suddenly being
Right.
successful, or their team seems to be getting along? They seem to be having more fun at work, those types of things. The other people start to maybe feel a little jealous or think like, I want
It's
to get in on
attractive.
that.
Yeah,
So
of course.
yeah,
Of course.
absolutely. So yeah, starting small, just making one substantive little change, because change is hard. No matter how comfortable with change you are, it's always upsetting and it's always difficult. So just taking something small and working through that. And then
Mhm.
from there, you just get more comfortable and it builds and builds.
I can totally see, and I know the listeners are hearing all of these different implications and applications of your unique personality type, even within how you've gone about how you approach your work, not just marketing strategy, but how you approach your work. That's so cool. No wonder. Like, no wonder you're doing this kind of work and why it would be attractive, because you're living from your preferences. You're living from your natural feel good place. So good. So now let's turn around and talk about your marketing strategy. So before finding marketingpersonalities.com and knowing you were an ISFP marketing personality type, how were you marketing your stuff? And were you, because you're kind of new into your business, and so were you able to
Yeah.
find marketingpersonalities.com pretty early on, or was there a period there where you were doing stuff without your personality type?
Yeah, I would say I found you not too long into my journey. I was initially finding a lot of highly structured, multi-level marketing funnels, like just overly complex email sequences, things like that.
Mhm.
And to me, that just it just felt like too much structure. It felt like
Mhm.
too much order. It didn't feel like I was able to be flexible enough and sort of bring my personality into things.
Mhm.
And so when I started, looking at what marketing personalities had to offer, and I got my report, it just felt like, oh, this feels like a breath of fresh air. Like it felt like me. And so, the biggest thing that I think I found through my report, and then you and I talking on that strategy session, was this idea of my ideal marketing strategy is, the try before you buy option. And I had been saying that to people as I was figuring out a way to do my marketing, where I was saying, I have a hard time articulating my value and what I bring into words and into marketing materials. If I can just get somebody in a room and talk to them, like I've got them,
Mhm.
because, I can pretty intuitively tap into people and what's going on with them. And I'm really good at sort of taking quick, small action. So I have found that if I can just sit down and talk with somebody, then that is really where, I come through and I'm most effective.
Mhm.
So then by establishing the idea of having, sort of these free coaching sessions that would happen. And a lot of coaches have that. You have your discovery session that you offer it for free. But I was finding a lot of that, again, was just really structured and say, you do
Mhm.
one session, here's the script, you do that. And for
Mhm.
me, I maybe do one or two calls with somebody and just explore. And then that really gives them an opportunity of saying, I kind of like this person. I trust this person. They seem like they're really invested in helping me out, really interested in learning what's going on with me, what's going on with my business, my organization. And so by doing that, it allows me to have that flexibility. It allows me to be adaptable and to say, there's no hard and fast rule here about when I'm going to say, hand the credit card over. It's like I'm working on, this is my worth, this is my value, this is how much what I provide. So, you can't do that forever, but maybe doing, two calls with somebody, that for me is totally worth it if it means that they are really bought in.
Mhm.
Because I think it can be difficult. You say, okay, I'm going to do this call. And then at the end, they're going to try to have me hand over potentially thousands of dollars. That's a huge investment.
Mhm.
And for me, I really want people to feel like they will be guided, they will be taken care of, they will be heard, they will be understood, and that I am really invested in helping them get great outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
So that has really freed me up to just think differently about the way that I approach my marketing and what do I put out there.
Yeah.
And the other thing that was sort of interesting to me after we did our call, I actually went back through some of my old like assessments, and I went to my old Myers-Briggs assessment, and I realized that I'm actually only slightly in a preference for introversion, and I'm quite close to introversion and extroversion. So I went ahead and I got the ESFP report as well. And that one told me, your best way of marketing is to like entertain, do an event, do videos, things like that, which I do really love to do that. I love to speak to groups of people and sort of use my personality to do that. So it was a great thing because I picked that up as well, and then sort of melding the two. So I can put things out there that sort of, funnel people to my website and to my offer of free coaching. But then also I'm pursuing opportunities to go out and talk to groups and do that. And that honors sort of that enthusiastic, outgoing side of my personality that doesn't mind talking to large groups of people. So it's been a real like cool and amazing way to blend those two sides and know that sometimes that extroverted performance-based is going to drain me a little bit. So I can only do so much of that. And then it's nice to sink back into my introverted side and just sort of allow my writing, my blog. You and I talked about developing sort of an ebook to sort of have that available for people to get introduced to me through my writing. That doesn't require me to constantly be on and selling. And then that can funnel people towards me to take advantage of my free coaching offer.
Yeah. And none of that involves a super complicated sales funnel and tripwires and email sequences and all of those things that's what you found when you first started looking at, okay, I am going out on my own. A lot of this is going to be online based, and so online marketing. All right, what can I find? Well, you get hit with those complicated sales funnels. And some of those things don't feel complicated for some people, like some of those things,
right?
Those strategies are great for some types of people and not for you. And so finding this try before you buy way, and it's so much simpler than I think a lot of things that are out there for online entrepreneurs to tap into. It's so much simpler. It's so much more action oriented, experience driven, which is exactly how you are and anyone in the Explorer tribe. And it gets you into contact with that person faster. And that's exactly what you need to be effective, being who you are, right? And so I love that. And I also love that you've brought up this ability to blend your top two personality types to create your absolute best marketing strategy. This comes up all the time. Listeners, if you haven't sent me a question like this, you've probably considered asking this question. So I'm going to lay it out right now. If you have your top tier, your primary personality type, and you kind of feel like one of your preferences is really close on the midline and you feel like, okay, I'm mostly an ISFP, but my extroverted preference is really close to my introverted. And so I'm kind of in the middle. And so would it make sense for me to tap into the ESFP recommendations and blend those with the ISFP? My answer is yes, it would totally make sense, because if your preferences are very, very close, then you can pick up and tap into recommendations from both, bring them together, and create the absolute best feel good marketing strategy for you. And I love how you, Sarah, are already thinking about like, okay, knowing that introversion and extroversion are close on the spectrum, you know that there are going to be some boundaries that maybe a really highly extroverted person doesn't have, right? Like, it's not like you're all the way on the extroversion scale. So there might be an ESFP out there that is super extroverted. They're going to appear in front of their audiences differently than you are. And they might not have any kind of boundary around how many events they go to in a week or how many events they try to get, on stage for in a month or whatever. Whereas for you, now that you're self-aware and you're tapping into these cues, that, okay, there might be a boundary, that looks different from another ESFP, but it is an option. And you can tap into that option because sometimes that is going to feel good. And at other times, you're going to know that your ISFP nature is going to be kind of your backbone. And, let's think about what we have to have in place for that truly to be a backbone in the times where the extroverted piece, I'm not feeling it. That could be a day, that could be a week. Sometimes, I know I feel like this. Sometimes that extroverted preference doesn't feel totally accurate for months at a time. And so, we got to have that introverted backbone to carry us through that. But I love how you're blending it. I love how you're allowing it to be simple, not overly structured. And I think you just gave a ton of inspiration and permission to those who don't feel great about the highly complicated, highly structured sales funnels out there, because there are other ways to do it. So would you say, since your strategy check session, the main things that have kind of shifted in how you're approaching marketing is the commitment to offering those try before you buy sessions, and then also leveraging that semi extroverted piece of you? Are those kind of like your takeaways? Is there anything else to add to that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I feel so good. And I actually have a good friend who's kind of become my coaching mentor, and that she has her own very successful coaching practice. And I was talking to her about this, closing the deal and sort of selling to a new client. And she said herself, she says, yeah, she's like, sometimes, I meet them and I take them, we go for a walk around the lake or something like that. And it was just this like feeling, like it hit me in my heart. And I just said, oh, like that sounds right. So here is somebody else who is quite a few years into her journey as an entrepreneur, as a coach, and a consultant. And she just kind of gave me permission to say, yeah, there are people that think that I'm crazy because I'm giving up potentially hundreds, if not thousands of dollars by, giving people 2 coaching calls before they give me their credit card. And to me, that felt right. It just really did. So the try before you buy piece has just really, really solidified for me. I can be successful doing this. And so that's what I've been doing, is just really focusing. And people will say, well, I have this person that I might refer, but I don't know if they'll reach out. And, maybe, and I just say, hey, just tell them to give me a call, send me an email, send me a text, and we'll get on the phone and we'll just talk a little bit. So taking off that pressure of this will be a sales call, we'll get there. If they're really committed, we'll get there. And if I spend an hour or 2 talking with somebody, like that sort of just fulfills my soul mission of like helping people feel a little bit better in this world. And if they get something great out of me just by having those couple of conversations, they might become a client. They might refer somebody else to me. So for me, building those relationships is just so important in connecting to people. So I have been very fortunate to have my strategy call with you, to talk to my friend who's the coach, and just kind of be given the permission to just say, yeah, your gut tells you to do this. That's great.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, I'm seeking out opportunities where I can go speak. And I can get in front of a room, provide them value, give them some quick wins, with a speaking engagement, presentation. And from there, again, if they start following me, they start reading my blog and just learning about the things that I have to say about the modern workplace and careers for women nowadays, then great. That's fantastic. It's really, for me, about building community that will translate over into the business side of things. But I think it's really all about starting to build that community.
Mm-hmm. You know what you just tapped into that I want to send listeners to. Listeners, if you have listened to episode 132 called The Prove It Method, that episode aired on October 31st. The Prove It Method was framed in a way for thinking types to really prove it to themselves that, hey, like what you're trying to do is actually possible. What I love about what you just shared, Sarah, is that you kind of are tapping into the prove it method in a feeler type of way. You ended up finding someone who is showing you that what you are kind of being called to do in this easier, less structured way to attract and serve and then ultimately, get a paying client this less structured way, you've attracted and you've tapped into someone who's doing it that way, which for you is in a very personal way proving to you that, oh, like that is actually an option, like, hey, I could do it that way. Sure, there are lots of people out there that want to teach you their sales strategy and their consult call framework and their, this is when you ask for the money and this is when all this stuff. And there's another way to do it. And you found someone. I mean, I'm so grateful you found someone that's showing you that, oh, wait, there's actually another way to do this. And so, listeners, if you haven't listened to episode 132 and you're feeling like you need proof that what you're being called to do is actually a viable solution, and a viable way to go, even though it's not how a lot of other people you're seeing are doing it. You got to go back and listen to that episode. And I'm grateful that you've brought this example up, Sarah, because that can be so powerful in staying the course and really living out the way that you are being called to do your thing, right? Whether it's business model, product, service, or marketing strategy, that's so, so important. So as we come to the end of this interview, Sarah, I'm curious, you are within the first year of your business being full time. And I'm curious, can you take us into the vision for your company in the next year? Where are we headed with this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What I saw in my previous career was lots of leaders, particularly women leaders, who they desperately had this sense of, oh, I want it to be different. The way things are happening, the pace, the demands, all of those sorts of things. I think for many of us, we're just a bit overwhelmed, and it's getting to be more and more people. It started as a kernel for some people, but it's getting more. Stress is just rampant. Anxiety is rampant. There are a lot of people struggling day to day. Mm-hmm. And so, like, my greater vision is to influence the way that we do work in the world that doesn't require us to burn out, to sink small, and not share our gifts that we have with the world. Every single one of us is so uniquely and innately gifted to be able to contribute to the world. So for me, that vision just really is of thinking about a different way of being with people. So the way that I approach doing that is, like I said, building community of like-minded people who are really driven by their values and driven by their purpose. And so giving people the permission and supporting them to believe that they can do something in a different way, that they can lead their organizations differently, that they don't have to separate their personal from their professional. You find that people talk about work-life balance. I like to think about work-life flow. Like sometimes you're going to flow and there's going to be a wave of business and a wave of work that requires you to work some more hours. And then you're going to flow and you're going to have some more time with your family. And we just kind of go back and forth with that. But to be able to just stand up and say, my gut is telling me that I don't need to have all of these meetings. These meetings are wasteful, all of that stuff. So for me, I love that idea of saying I'm very driven by the feeling side of me and my connection to other people. But I have this ability to show others how to take small, meaningful, and inspired action every day, because that small incremental change is what develops into big monumental change.
Yeah.
And we see this all the time, that movements start to rise up, and then fundamentally we see changes. And that might start just being a part of your own family, that might be a part of your own team at work.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's the organization, sometimes it's your community, your city, and then it rises from there. So however I can be a part of that in supporting people to build a career that is of service and filled with purpose and helps us all to just take care of ourselves a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
We really have to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of others.
Listeners, do you see how congruent and aligned what Sarah just shared is with who she naturally is, right? She's on mission to kind of revolutionize how female leaders are leading and how female leaders are doing work. Because, and I mean, if you haven't picked up on this in our society, in our culture right now, we're recognizing that the female way of doing things is not the male way of doing things. And for those of us who are adult females living in the world right now, we recognize that when we work in the corporate structure, we are taking our female tendencies and our preferences, and we're kind of having to fit them into the male way of doing things. And we've done this for decades now. And we're recognizing now that it's not working. Like it's really not working. And how brilliant is it that this human that we've just gotten to listen to, Sarah, is the kind of person just naturally who doesn't want all that structure and really wants more of that light structure, more of a flow. And she's, of course, the person that's bringing this to the female leader who, she doesn't want the high structure either. She wants the light structure, and she knows she could thrive in that, but doesn't really know how to create a voice and a way of doing that. And so Sarah's going to come in there and she's going to encourage that female leader to do it her way and play around and explore and try to do things a little differently here and there and see what we can do with that. Like, all of that is so cohesive and I love it. Can you tell that I'm like super, super supporting this mission? I am so into it. And I'll add this in and then we're going to stop, but I'll just add this in. I don't talk about this because it's not my area of expertise, but I do have the privilege of speaking with a lot of female entrepreneurs who used to have a corporate career, right? And something that I hear come up a lot, like a lot. Like, I don't know the actual percentage. I'm not going to give an actual stat, but it feels like a vast majority of people who I get to speak with about this is these female entrepreneurs are recognizing that their personality type now is different from what they thought it was when they were in their corporate career. And what they're identifying is that, I think that who I am now was always in there, but I didn't realize that I wasn't living my true actual self and my true preferences because I thought I needed to be a different way. And I'm seeing, I have conversations about this all the time. And maybe that's because this is kind of my own story, but I felt like I needed to be more of a thinker. In my own personal journey, I thought I had to be more of a thinking type in my corporate career than a feeling type. I didn't feel like the feeling type was at all praised or wanted or appreciated. And so I forced myself to be more of that thinking type. And now I realize that's not me. That's not actually me. And so I'm hearing that from a lot of female entrepreneurs right now, realizing that, like I can do the thinking thing, but it's really not my preferred place to make decisions from. And then we're able to have this beautiful conversation around giving them permission to, since they are owning their own company now, they get to do it the way that they want to do it. And they get to do it in the way that feels good. And that is the way that's going to make the biggest difference. So I think you're onto something, sister, because I see it in the personality trending. And then, of course, we're seeing it in all of society. So after all of that, where can the listeners find you online and support this vision? I mean, I need to know too. So
Absolutely. Yeah. So you can find me on my website, which is sarahgroskreutz.com, which I assume you might share in the notes from the podcast. And so you might be able to do that.
Definitely. That's
and
linked.
Then also, yeah, great. You can find me on both Instagram and Facebook at Sarah Groskreutz Coaching.
Perfect. So Sarah's got a funny little last name, which I totally understand because y'all know my maiden name was super funky too. So I have linked her website, her Instagram, and her Facebook in the show notes. Of course, they're going to be in the blog post as well. So all clickable. You'd never have to actually type that into your browser. So go find that link, go follow her on Instagram, check out what she's got going on her website. And if any or all of what she just shared is resonating with you and you want to support it, that's where you need to go. You need to go to her website, her Instagram, her Facebook, connect with her there. And the woman is on a mission and I totally support it. So that's super cool. And I'm so glad. I mean, I'm so grateful that you've been able to tap into your feel-good marketing strategy this early on, right? Like that, I hear from people all the time where they're like, man, I've been at this for 7 years and I wish I would have known my marketing personality type a long time, like when I started, because I feel like I would be so much farther along. And that may be true. And I can't wait to kind of look back on this episode in like 5 years and be like, hey, this is a great example. She did get it when she first started and look at where she's at now. So Sarah, thank you so much for being here and sharing all of that with us.
Thank you, Brit. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. All right. So listeners, go find Sarah. Again, the link to her website and her social media accounts are in the show notes right here in the app that you're listening to this episode from. And I'll catch you back here next week with another incredible behind the scenes look at a company's marketing strategy. As always, right? So talk to you then.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Marketing Personalities Podcast. Now it's time to connect your marketing strategy to your personality type. Go to marketingpersonalities.com/MPP to download your marketing personality type full report. Use the code MPP at checkout to get $10 off. And that's a super special code for podcast listeners as a way to say thank you for being here. In your full report, you'll learn about your personality type, how it relates to the work you do, what your best marketing strategy includes so you can start implementing it right away, what your worst marketing strategy includes so you can avoid it, and so much more. Go to marketingpersonalities.com/MPP to get your full report and use the code MPP at checkout to receive $10 off your purchase. And one more thing before you skip on to the next podcast. Would you please share this episode with your entrepreneur friends who also need to feel good about their marketing strategies? Take a quick screenshot of your podcast app right now and share it out via text, Facebook, or my favorite, Instagram. Remember to tag me at Marketing Personalities in the photo so I can be sure to send you a huge high five and thank you for sharing the love. This podcast is edited and produced by the Podcast Engineers. They're pretty great, and you can find them at podcastengineers.com. That's all for now. Thanks as always for listening, and I'll catch you back here next week on the Marketing Personalities Podcast. Love ya. Bye.